Wet across northern and western England, Wales first thing. Then the rain sinks into southern counties of England, where it lingers for some time into the afternoon. Brighter skies follow for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, as well as northern England, with some showers falling as snow over the hills. Feeling cold in the north, also feeling unpleasant in the far south, with the outbreaks of rain continuing. But for Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia, at least there will be some afternoon drier and brighter interludes. Then another band of rain. Tuesday evening turns up to bring a wet night to many. The far north of Scotland staying clear of that, but for most it is cloudy, it's damp, and it's increasingly windy across southern parts of the country as we start off Wednesday. Now, with the wind and the rain, it's going to be a mild start to Wednesday, but it will be an increasingly unsettled day, certainly across northern parts of the country. Once the first area of rain's out of the way, another area of rain turns up into the afternoon, and the winds really ramp up by the end of the afternoon into the start of the evening for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, as well as North Wales. Risk of stormy conditions, risk of disruptive and damaging winds in places.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into what you have been talking about today. And the media in this country leads today with headlines such as frantic 48 hours to save Europe from war. It's safe to say, though, that there's quite a different message emerging from the other side of the fence. For example, the Ukrainian president says that such warnings are simply stoking panic, and he's asking for proof of said invasion, and Russia is saying that warnings re Ukraine are alarmist. So what is the reality? And imagine this, being told that you're a liar and a thief by your employer, and then being sent to prison, all for something you didn't do. I'll be talking to someone who experienced exactly that. I'm speaking, of course, of the sub-postmaster scandal and a public inquiry for which opens today. What will justice look like for those affected? And university staff across the UK have today gone on strike. Again, over, you guessed it, pensions and pay. But I mean, really? Don't you think that students have gone through enough disruption these past 2 years without more? And another day, another sitting, another freedom convoy, this time arriving in Brussels. What do you reckon? Are these guys heroes? Or are they just a pain in the behind? We'll have all that to come and more, but first, the latest news headlines.
Good evening. More than £40 billion have been wiped off the London Stock Exchange as tensions grow over the situation in Ukraine. The Prime Minister has warned the situation is very dangerous, with intelligence suggesting Russia could invade the country as early as Wednesday. Boris Johnson is due to chair a Cobra meeting tomorrow.
I realise that this is a very, very dangerous, difficult situation. We are on the edge of a precipice, but there is still time for President Putin to step back, and what we're urging is for everybody to engage in dialogue, for a conversation to take place, and for the Russians to avoid what I think everybody, certainly everybody in the UK, can see would be a disastrous mistake, disastrous for Russia.
Boris Johnson. Well, the Defence Secretary has also confirmed the UK is deploying a small number of troops to Lithuania, which is also concerned about Russia's military build-up. Earlier, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss chaired a Cobra meeting to discuss the UK's position on the crisis.
There is always a choice, but that choice is for Vladimir Putin. He needs to understand that there would be severe costs if he invades Ukraine. And those costs would be felt by Russian companies, by oligarchs, and ultimately the Russian people. He needs to de-escalate. He needs to take his troops away from the border.
Liz Truss. Well, news here at home, and a manhunt has been launched to find a convicted sex offender. Paul Robson, who's serving a life sentence for attempted rape and indecent assault, escaped from an open prison in Lincolnshire. He'd been refused parole 5 times. Police are saying he presents a danger to women and young children and could now be anywhere in the country. A jury has been sworn in for the trial of 3 people accused of murdering a 5-year-old boy in Bridgend. Logan Mwangi's body was found on a riverbank in July last year. His mother, her partner and a 14-year-old boy have all been charged with his killing. All 3 deny the murder. A sub-postmaster has told a public inquiry that he contemplated suicide after being falsely accused of theft. He was one of more than 700 former post office employees who were affected by accounting errors caused by flawed computer software. The discrepancies occurred between 2000 and 2014 and left some workers in massive debt, with many being jailed. Petrol and diesel prices have reached a new record high. According to the AA, the average price of unleaded fuel is now around 148 pence a litre, which means filling up a 55-litre car would cost around £80. The average cost of diesel hit just over 151 pence a litre. The Metropolitan Police Federation says it has no faith in the London Mayor after the very public ousting of Dame Cressida Dick last week. The body, which represents more than 31,000 officers, says the atmosphere in the force has now hit rock bottom after she resigned as Commissioner. Dame Cressida stepped down last Thursday after Sadiq Khan made it clear he had no confidence in her plans to reform the force. The Duchess of Cornwall is self-isolating after testing positive for coronavirus. It's the first time Camilla has had the infection, catching it just days after the Prince of Wales tested positive for a second time. Clarence House has confirmed Her Royal Highness is triple vaccinated. And unvaccinated teenagers can now travel to Spain as long as they produce a negative PCR test. The country's reversed its policy, demanding UK visitors aged between 12 and 17 be double jabbed. The change coincides with the start of half-term. Colleen Rooney has been ordered to pay £65,000 to Rebecca Vardy's agent to cover legal fees. That's after she lost her bid to include Caroline Watt in a High Court case. It's part of an ongoing battle between the footballers' wives over an online post. Miss Rooney has publicly accused Miss Vardy and her agent of leaking stories about her private life in 2019. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now it's time for more from Michelle and Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I've got to say that last story, Waggerford Christie or whatever it is, how ridiculous. Some people have just got more money than sense, haven't they? Goodness me. Anyway, by the way, it's Valentine's Day tonight, today as well. If you're up to anything good, let me know. If you're having a microwave meal for one, also let me know. Do you care about Valentine's Day? Do you only care about Valentine's Day if you've got a partner and you don't get anything? Get in touch and let me know. Anyway, keeping me company tonight, we've got Alex Dean, a PR consultant, Jeff Phillips, a journalist and former political advisor, and Austin Williams, who's the director of Future Cities Project. Also, as I said, it's not just about us here, it's about you at home as well and your thoughts. You know the drill by now. You can get in touch with me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Now, first of all, let's talk Ukraine, shall we? Because Boris Johnson will hold talks with world leaders this week in an attempt to bring Russia, I quote, back from the brink of war with Ukraine. Tension is continuing to grow on the border between the countries, where Russia has more than 100,000 troops. Let's listen to what the Prime Minister had to say.
The signs are, as you've heard from President Biden, that they're at least planning for something that could take place as early as in the next 48 hours. That is extremely concerning, where what we need to do is make sure that President Putin understands the economic consequences, the political consequences of doing this.
Well, on GB News this morning, the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK, Vadim Prishteka, clarified comments in which he appeared to indicate Kiev could walk away from its bid to join NATO. He says the country is not backing down.
The strategy is that we will become member of NATO, and it is even enshrined, if I may put this word, in our constitution. That's why we are not backing up. He has to find something, a compromise we will compromise, not on the principal things like NATO or our future in the West.
Now, joining us is our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, good evening to you. I mean, I have to say, there is a bit of conflicting messaging going around at the moment from Ukraine, are basically saying, calm down the panic. Of course, some might say that they need to say that to kind of stop the volatility on their own economy. But the US is saying that, Russia is saying that the US are basically creating more panic than needs. Our front pages, as I said, they're talking about the next 4 hours and potential invasions. What's going on? What is the truth? Who do we believe?
Well, there's no doubt the Ukrainian government is extremely worried, and they have reason to be because they've lived through this before. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea. There has been a low-level insurgency happening in parts of eastern Ukraine and the Donbas region also for a number of years now, which has cost some 13,500 Ukrainian lives. So they've every reason to be concerned, even if outwardly they're trying to remain optimistic about the potential for diplomacy to win through here. But the concern really lies in this intelligence assessment that's come from the US government. Now, they have given Wednesday as a key date. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that there's going to be an invasion of Ukraine by Russia on Wednesday. But what it does mean is that the key components of the military forces that have been massing at the Ukraine border, both in Russia and in Belarus, are in place there. The artillery is there, their field hospitals are there, all the supply routes are now in place. Not just that, Russian naval assets and Russian Air Force assets are all in place. So come Wednesday, it is the assessment of intelligence services within the US, and I think also with agreement of other Western intelligence agencies as well, that they would be in a position to launch an incursion into Ukraine if they so desire. The world, of course, is now watching, and really the next move is Vladimir Putin's.
Yeah, and in terms of our response, UK's response, compared to other NATO members, how do we compare what we're doing compared to, say, I don't know, Germany, France, etc.?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Britain and the US have really led the way in terms of the international response here through NATO, sending extra troops to bolster these understandably very concerned NATO countries. So the UK has put 350 more Royal Marines into Poland, on top of the more than 300 British troops already in that country. There are also 900 British troops in Estonia. 1,000 more are on standby to go out there, depending on how the situation escalates or otherwise. In addition to that, you have naval assets, British naval assets, going into the Eastern Mediterranean. You have the supercarrier HMS Prince of Wales, which is part of the NATO battle group, heading up to Norway soon with more British and international naval assets and some extra British Typhoon fighters. So Britain trying to send out that message to its NATO allies in the region, as well as, of course, to Ukraine, that it is there, that it takes what is happening very seriously indeed, and is warning of very significant repercussions, of course, financially in terms of sanctions against Russia, but also giving that help and support to those NATO allies, because any conflict that breaks out in Ukraine would affect those neighbouring countries as well, with a refugee crisis potentially spilling out into those regions. There is a lot at stake here and a lot of potential for this to escalate to become a Europe-wide conflict.
Yeah, I've got to say, Matt, you've led into my next question quite well, actually, because often I get viewers to this show messaging in and basically saying, they're not saying who cares, but I guess they're asking, well, why should we care? Because, you know, this is not, it's not happening here. Can you just help understand my viewers understand the magnitude of the impacts that could come our way if this does spill over into a conflict?
Well, they certainly should care. At the very least, we should not be in a position in 2021 where an aggressive bullying state is threatening to invade its neighbour like this unless it gets what it wants at the negotiating table. That's what Vladimir Putin is doing here by demanding that Ukraine renounces its right to join NATO. It's never going to happen as far as the Ukrainians are concerned. And NATO, of course, it's a core principle that any sovereign nation, providing the conditions are met, should be allowed to join this defensive alliance. But apart from that issue of this aggressive and bullying country within Europe, there is the other issue of how it will affect the likes of energy prices. We know they're spiking already. And even though we don't get much in the way of gas from Russia, European countries, particularly the likes of Germany, do. So if there's a sudden cut-off or shortage of energy supplies coming from Russia, then everybody's scrambling after the same energy supplies that we rely on ourselves. That's going to push the prices up. Ukraine, it's been known as the breadbasket of Europe because of the huge grain production in Ukraine and in Russia as well. So those supplies dry up. Again, food prices are on the rise. And then, of course, there are many families throughout the UK who have people that are in the military, loved ones and friends who are in the military here already. Increasing numbers of UK military personnel are going out to that region. Many more will follow if Russia decides to invade its neighbour.
Yeah, very brief final question. So very brief with your answer, just for time reasons, if you will, Mark. Am I right in thinking anyway that all this conversation about can Ukraine or will Ukraine join NATO, as I understand it, they can't join currently anyway because of this dispute?
Well, yes, it is a sort of, again, a requirement of NATO that if you want to join NATO, you shouldn't be involved in a current border dispute. Now, of course, we know that at the moment Ukraine is absolutely in that particular predicament because of what happened with the annexation of Crimea and the ongoing insurgency in the east, in the Donbass region. So in that sense, it wouldn't qualify. And the thing is, Vladimir Putin knows this. He knows that it's probably many years away, if ever, before Ukraine joins NATO. But there's more at stake for Vladimir Putin. There's the instability that this brings to his neighbour that wants to choose that democratic path. There's also, of course, the division he likes to try to sow within NATO itself, where you see Germany, certainly at the outset there, taking a different path from other NATO allies like the UK and the US.
Mark White, thanks for your insight there. Alex Dean, your thoughts on all of this?
It's really interesting listening to Mark, but I'm not sure I agree with him on the fundamental point about Ukraine and NATO. I completely disapprove of Russia's behaviour, but that doesn't mean it won't work. Sometimes bullying does work on the international stage. Let's acknowledge they're still holding on to Crimea, which is part of Ukraine. So it's worked to that extent already. And Mark was saying that, in his view, there's no way that the Ukrainians will give up on potential membership of NATO. But, of course, their ambassador took one view yesterday before taking another view today on that very point. So I'm not so sure about that either. We don't know right now what Russia is going to do. We do know for a fact that the Ukrainian economy is going into the toilet because of this situation. And we run the really peculiar risk right now of the Ukrainians underestimating the risk that they face, deliberately trying to downplay the situation because they're so afraid of that economic harm and potentially downplay it until it's too late. We've really got to stand up for them. We've really got to help the Ukrainians. And in the end, we either believe the American intelligence and think they're our most important ally, we either believe that intelligence or we don't. I say we do.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, Alex is saying there about the Ukrainians potentially downplaying the threat until it may well be too late. But actually, when you look at what's going on in Ukraine, there's some fascinating imagery actually that's come out today as well of all manner of civilians, normal everyday people, there with their kind of practice rifles, guns, whatever you want to call them, getting ready to defend themselves, their country.
Yeah, but if you know, as Mark alluded in that interview with you, this has been going on since 2014 when the Russians took over Crimea. And Russia is like a great big boa constrictor. I mean, it squeezes. I think Boris Johnson, frankly, is using this as an excuse to detract from his own personal problems at home with Partygate. And so he's trying to look tough, he's trying to look bold. Liz Truss, our Foreign Secretary, who seems to have a different outfit every day for a Barbie doll who is a Foreign Secretary.
What an awful thing to say.
No, but she's always on Instagram. Have you not seen how many photographs?
But so what? What's that got to do with the price of fish?
Because she doesn't know the difference.
She
doesn't know the difference between the Baltic and the Black Sea. Those sort of things are a bit more important than having your photograph taken.
Oh, I think that's really...
Well, you can think what you like.
Why would you say something like that?
Because what I'm saying, Michelle, is that we've got a Foreign Secretary who's clearly out of her depth, a Prime Minister who's using any excuse to deflect from his troubles at home. And actually,
Russia looks like it's going to invade Ukraine, and for you, it's about Boris Johnson.
Well, if you just let me finish, actually, it's not. It's about listening to reporters who are in Ukraine and people on the ground. But when you have Liz Truss talking about the economic sanctions and the economic impact on Russia, we are going to see the economic effect of those billions and billions of pounds that have been wiped off the stock market today. That's happening around Europe and in America.
But that's temporary volatility, though, isn't it? You get market shocks based on all kinds of different things, and then you get recoveries.
Talking it up. I think the Americans and the Brits are talking it up. Scholz is there today, the German Chancellor. He's taking a much more let's try and talk about this, let's try and use diplomacy instead of sabre rattling, and I don't think that's going to help.
I did wait for you to finish, but I really don't understand. Is your position that the Americans are lying because they say they have specific intelligence that there was a risk of invasion on Wednesday? And now, you can say Boris Johnson's playing things up, but either the Americans are right or wrong, or at least they're telling the truth that that's really what they think, or they're lying.
I have grave doubts about that.
There was a rumour of weapons of mass destruction not too long ago, so I think we can recognise that there are truths and untruths which come out of war, potential war situations, and I think this is a very dangerous situation, so we can't downplay that, and we can't, pretend otherwise. But it's more the fact that it's almost like, in some ways I go along with that the West has always been nostalgic for Cold War certainties, but this is a bit of a kind of a post-Cold War standoff, where you almost have two sides that don't want a war, threatening each other and don't really know how to back out of it. So I think that's where the danger lies. This is a spark which could occur through nobody's kind of intention. So, in the past you normally had wars which had a point. What I do also think is that, partly relating to what's been said already, that I was listening to a lot of kind of phone-in shows today, and there's an awful lot of people who don't buy this. Now, for good or ill...
Don't buy what?
That it's not Boris trying to detract attention from Partygate or whatever it might be. Whether that's true or not is kind of up for
Do you
grabs.
think Boris Johnson would conjure up a war to distract from a piece of
I'm
birthday
not saying.
cake?
I'm just saying that this is a response, and I think that when you actually have a situation where you're telling the country that we may go to war, yet you cannot build up the trust in that war, people don't believe it, you have a really significant problem at home.
I don't. You put that in a way that is memorable to me from my time at the criminal bar. You said that there might be a spark that could set off a situation, as if Russia hadn't parked 130,000 troops on a border.
Or the European Union isn't funding Ukraine to kind of bring them into NATO, which is, Russia's always said is a red line.
Anything like this escalation. So I used to have clients who'd say something like, we were in the playground and there was a knife and he got stabbed. Which means I went to the playground, I took a knife there and I stabbed him. And you've removed all of the action, all of the behaviour and all of the blame in the way that you passively, well, there might be a spark that could set something off. Putin is moving towards war.
So do you think he's the aggressor,
Of course he is.
I don't think anyone doubts that he's the aggressor and he's the bully. And
some do. Some people would say the aggressor is the expansion of NATO.
But he is also trying to deflect from his troubles at home. It suits him to be looking...
That's true, I agree with that.
Oh, good. But, it suits him very well to look tough and have that ridiculous table, which is almost as far apart as Alex and I am when he sat down with President Macron the other day.
Yeah, but a lot of that, though, was because he wouldn't take the
Russian test.
The COVID test.
Yeah, but he had his own minister at the same distance. It's sort of, past the marmalade, isn't it? I think we have to wait and see. I think we have to be very cautious about... believing American intelligence. I mean, when it was, they're going in on Wednesday, it was sort of like, what, he's got the bloke coming to fix the boiler on Tuesday, he couldn't do Monday. It just does not sound plausible.
Austin?
Well, I mean, it's hard to... all I'm trying to say is it's hard to work out what is plausible these days because there is a threat, and it's almost like suggesting that the intelligence says Putin will invade on Wednesday, therefore we're going to be in war by Thursday. Now, many Ukrainians, and I know several Ukrainians who don't believe that, maybe through naivety or through their own intelligence. Russia doesn't seem to want to be an expansive USSR anymore. I don't believe that for a second. And there is a tendency for America and Britain to kind of overplay their hand, especially in the light of their complete collapse in Afghanistan. So therefore there's a recognition that in a collapsing world where the West is seen to be weak and Russia is seen to be kind of playing ball with China and maybe forming a new alliance, whether that's meaningful or whether it's just temporary, we don't really know, then obviously there is a geopolitical conversation going on which we can't downplay and we can't pretend is anything other than serious. But I do think that there are more players here which we need to be concerned about. And I also think that Putin is a convenient kind of bugbear, whether he's riding bareback on a horse or whether it's Carol Cadwallader saying that he's been the mastermind behind the Leave campaign. Everybody now sees Russia as being behind everything. So I think we just need to calm this down, maybe kind of keep the language toned down.
Putin could diffuse this by pulling troops back.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
And he could, and it would be a good thing for him to do because he would then say, I was never going to invade. Look at them. They've all panicked. And he'll look good.
Well, there you go. Mixed opinions on the panel. Lots of mixed opinions coming through on the email and Twitter as well. I'm still reeling about what Joe's saying about wardrobes. I'm going to have a break to get over that. When we come back, I want to talk about the public inquiry. This is, of course, many of you will know this now. Some people call it the biggest miscarriage of justice in British legal history. I'm talking, of course, of the Post Office scandal. After the break, we'll be looking at that, and I'll be talking to one woman who was sent to prison for this. Can you imagine being not only told that you're a liar and a thief, but going to prison because of it when you're innocent all along? We'll have that and more after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Just a brief reminder for those listening, not watching, who my panel is tonight. We've got Alex Dean, the PR consultant. We've got Joe Phillips, a journalist and former political advisor. And Austin Williams, who's the director of Future Cities Project. Lots of you have been getting in touch about your responses to that Ukraine situation. I'll be reading out some of your contacts a bit later on. But for now, I want to focus on something else. The public inquiry to examine the wrongful convictions of hundreds of sub-postmasters and mistresses began today. Just as a recap, if you're not familiar, between 2000 and 2014, hundreds of workers were wrongly accused of theft, fraud and false accounting due to a flaw in a computer system. Horizon was its name. A total of 72 former pubmasters. That sounds an all right job title, but actually I'm talking about sub-postmasters. They've had their names cleared so far. The cases constitute the most widespread miscarriage of justice in British legal history. Now,
lives were ruined. Families were torn apart. Families were made homeless and destitute. Reputations were destroyed, not least because the crimes of which the men and women were convicted, theft, fraud and false accounting, all involved acting dishonestly. People who were an important, respected and integral part of the local communities that they served were in some cases shunned.
Well, let me talk to one of those people affected by this, Janet Skinner. She was sentenced to 9 months in prison after being convicted of false accounting back in 2006 before the conviction was quashed in April last year. She's going to be speaking to the inquiry later on this month, but she joins me now. Janet, good evening to you. I mean, your story, jailed for 9 months for something that you did not do. The sum involved in your case was £59,000. I mean, just tell us your experience. It must be awful what you've been through over this last few years.
Yeah, I mean, mine's been ongoing since 2006. I mean, some people have been going through this for decades. It's just been a fight from day one. Nobody ever believes you because you're going up against quite a big institution. So it's just fighting for yourself, really.
I mean, you actually went to prison, didn't you? What was that experience like?
I did, yeah. I was sentenced on the 2nd of February in 2007, and I was released in April 2007. It was for me, it was an horrendous time, because going to jail when you know you've done nothing wrong. People proclaim they're already innocent, everybody's innocent that was in jail. But when you know that you actually are, I think that makes it harder. Separated from my kids, I refused to see them, didn't want them coming to jail, didn't want them to have that memory of me being in there. So, yeah, it was difficult.
And what do you want to happen now? I mean, you won't get those months of your life back that you spent in prison. You know, you will have had a period of damaged reputation, which hopefully has recovered now. But what does justice look like, for, not just for you, but for all of the others that have been impacted by this?
The justice is having somebody made accountable for what went wrong. Everybody knows that this goes higher. I mean, there was quite a lot of people involved. They had Parliament members on the board, and there is a lot. And we just want justice. People think this is all about money, but it's not about money at all. It's about the people at the top being treated exactly the same and thinking that they're above the law and they can break the law and just walk away with a healthy paycheck from it, where we've had to fight to prove our innocence and end up going to jail and ending up with nothing.
So, I mean, you mentioned people at the top. Paula Venables, who was the boss of the post office then, she was actually given a CBE in 2019 for services to post office and charity. I mean, that must have felt like a bit of a slap in the face for you.
Yeah, it is. And I've recently read today as well that the CBE won't be removed unless she's charged with an offence. I mean, who does that? Who gets a CBE for ruining so many people's lives? It's just, that's what I mean. The people at the top are always protected, and they're protected because they've got the money to protect themselves, where people like me didn't.
And you say, just finally, Janet, you say that you want some accountability for the people at the top to be held kind of responsible for what they did. What is your faith like at the moment? Do you think that's going to happen?
No. I'd like to believe that it's going to happen, but do I believe it will? No, I don't. I mean, maybe I might get further down the line and think that it's actually going to change, but honestly, the way that we've been dealt through the justice system anyway, I don't have any faith in any of it. I mean, look, you've only got to look at the Hillsborough inquiry, and you've also got to look at the Grenville inquiry. Who's been charged? Who's gone to jail? Nobody.
Yeah, I've got to say, I think some of your lack of kind of belief that it's going to happen in terms of the justice, I think it's understandable given your experience. Janet Skinner, I do hope that you get the justice that you are indeed seeking. Thanks for joining us. Jo Phillips, your thoughts?
I think it's awful. I think you can't even begin to imagine. This has gone on for 20 years. Yeah. And as the QC... Janet. Sorry. Well, no, the QC at the hearing was saying, it has destroyed lives. We know that several people have killed themselves. People have lost their homes. They've lost their reputation. Families have fragmented. And, as he was saying, post offices, particularly in small towns and rural areas, they are absolutely integral to the community. To have those people wrongly accused and their reputation in shreds, and you know what people are like. They've gone, no smoke without fire and all that sort of... You never get over that. Yeah. And she's absolutely right, Janet. Nobody has been called to account about this. And it all stems back to this Horizon technical
it's like an accounting system.
It's like an accounting system, and it was made by Fujitsu. And they kept saying, there's something wrong with this, there's something wrong with this, and nothing happened. And this has only got to this level, and as Janet alluded to, it's a little bit like Hillsborough. It's only the absolute indefatigable campaigning with the help of journalists and lawyers and other people that's got it to this stage. But whether anybody will pay the price, those people are never going to get their time back. They won't get the money. They were selling their houses. They were using their own money to make up the shortfall. It is absolutely appalling. And I can only wish her and the others, I think there's about 2,300 people involved, and only 900, if that, have had any sort of compensation. And that's, somebody was talking about it earlier today, and it's worked out at about £20,000, which is nothing. It's dreadful.
I absolutely agree, it's dreadful. I thought her Hillsborough comparison was interesting, but might be more positive than she thinks right now, facing what she faces, because the Hillsborough examples may suggest that the arc of history may be long, but it bends towards justice, and it suggests that the truth will out. The police said at Hillsborough that fans had pickpocketed the dead and urinated on policemen. Lies, but those lies were eventually exposed. And in the same way, I hope that this situation and this inquiry can eventually see that the truth comes out. I understand the point about the system that Joe was making, but in the end, it's not any company that can prosecute you. It's not any company that can send you wrongly to prison or ruin your life in the way that we've been looking at. It's the state, and the state fairly and squarely owns the responsibility here. Absolutely. And it's therefore for the state to compensate these individuals, not hide behind anything else. You may seek, the state may then go on to seek to claw money back from someone else. But it's for the state to make this right. And I say one more thing. I'm not being flippant about it, given all we've just said. Mistakes happen in life, even terrible mistakes and miscarriages of justice like this. The way you judge a society is not by the mistake, it's what you do afterwards to make it right. And that's where we're falling so short right now.
Yeah, my background, by the way, my business background, it's all around digital transformation and IT systems. And this is kind of what I used to do for a living once upon a time, install like huge IT systems or kind of work as a consultant on these projects. And I can't fathom how on earth these failings, these problems, these technical glitches, whatever you want to call them, just wasn't picked up, wasn't dealt with, wasn't flagged. Yeah. Because you would have all kinds of control mechanisms within your programme of work to flag these kind of things. So the fact that it wasn't, it's mind-blowing to me.
And you'd sort of see a pattern, wouldn't you? Even if there was, something was happening in Lincolnshire and then something in Cornwall, you'd begin to think, even if you were just looking at a spreadsheet, hang on a minute, if this was a piece of equipment that was used in a hospital and you were getting false diagnosis, or people were dying.
In every hospital.
In every hospital.
Yeah, but joined up thinking that requires Ofstim.
Obviously, I hope you weren't volunteering your guilt in the system there.
Mate, God, no, I wasn't involved in the post office or Horizon.
No, fair dues.
Did you think you had a scoop then, that somehow I was a bit guilty? No, just to be clear, I had no involvement in that particular transformation
No, but
programme.
it's more the fact that, what was interesting, what she said was the us and them scenario, which actually kind of goes back to my earlier point, which is that there is a fragmented society, a divided society, where people aren't trusting in the authorities, and the criminal justice system and the state itself isn't going through its best time at the moment, I don't think. But that idea of, she made a comparison with Grenfell, and it's a difficult one to make because they're both horrific examples, but that idea that, people complained in Grenfell and people weren't believed. The first instinct was to suggest that they were lying, or that they were making it up, or whatever it might be. That the first instinct was to suggest that they were operating with malign intent. And that idea that the state or the authorities or the employers, who did recognise there were computer problems, they did, in part of their inquiry, know that there was something amiss, because there were hundreds of people all apparently pocketing tens of thousands of pounds at the same time. They knew that there was something amiss with the system, and yet they still preferred to pinpoint ordinary people. And I think that kind of leads to a broader kind of cynicism, or broader scepticism, let's say, and a contempt for the authorities. So again, I'm with you. I wish them every good luck in the world. How you repay people for not just death and family destruction and losing their jobs and their mental health and everything, but from their kind of ostracization within their community, which they had to go through. The whole thing is an absolute disgrace, and as you say, one for the history books that hopefully we can learn from.
Yeah, and one of the key tragedies, as we alluded to earlier on, is that some people actually died without having their names cleared, and others committed suicide as well. So just an awful situation all around. So let's hope that they do get the justice that they're seeking. Now, I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about a few different things: university strikes and freedom convoys. The two are not related. We'll be discussing them both after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. keeping me company tonight. We've got Alex Dean, the PR consultant, Joe Phillips, a journalist and former political advisor, and Austin Williams, the director of the Future Cities project. Now let's talk universities, shall we? Because today, many of them, many lecturers, should I say, have begun a 10-day strike over cuts to pensions and some concerns around pay. Around 50,000 members of staff from 68 universities will go on strike over what they say are devastating cuts to pensions and deteriorating pay and working conditions. The university and college union said that universities can more than afford to meet the demands of staff, as industry finance figures from 2019 to 2020 show that total income across the sector was £41.9 billion. What do we think to this? Austin Williams, you are a university lecturer. What's your thoughts on this? Are you in support of the strikers?
Well, I mean, I'm in support of strikers if they have a justifiable cause for striking, and I think maybe pay and pensions and conditions are the traditional way the trade unions have to go about things. So in some ways, they've got a legitimate kind of cause for action. I think that the situation now is slightly different, where actually the trade unions have almost absented themselves from the discourse for the last 2 years of the pandemic and kind of walked away from lecturers' what the lecturer's true job should be, which is teaching students face-to-face. And even only last December, Joe Grady, who runs the University College Union, insisted that lecturers go back to online learning from December. We'd still be at home now if the trade unions had their way. And I think that's an absolute disgrace. So that alienation of the students from their lecturers and from their courses actually come back to bite lecturers on the backside, because actually students now, rather than actually building a solidarity in the universities, students are saying we want to have not only our fees reduced, but we want all the pay that is docked from the lecturers on the days that they take off. We want you to give it to us to maybe kind of buy us some kind of well-being courses and all the rest of it. So that's what's really going on, and I think that the unions are almost coming to the end of their useful life on this type of thing. The Tories, I think, have got a bit of a cheek because they're complaining about the unions, saying that they should go back to face-to-face teaching at the time when they actually were at the forefront of demanding that the student experience would be destroyed by online learning. Robert Halfon himself said that students should have a money-back guarantee. That's from the Commons Education Select Committee. So that idea that students for a long time have been treated as consumers, so it's like a supermarket of certification rather than a seat of learning. That's what universities have become. And I think that once you treat students like consumers, then suddenly you've destroyed that whole notion as to what an education is genuinely for. So on every level, there's a kind of collapse of belief and a collapse of solidarity within the unions. And in some ways, it's quite a good thing. And I think maybe we should start rebuilding something from grassroots up.
Alex?
Well, if you take everything that Austin said and put it together, it equals for me that this is the wrong time to strike. And there may well be many points that people want to make about their pay and conditions and so forth, but consider the experience of young people who are not going to get their time back. And there are third years in university who have hardly known in-person teaching at all. At all. If you've got a point, it's a bit like when people railway people go on strike at Christmas, because they know that's the time when people are going to pay most attention. I get it. But for heaven's sake, these students have had a wretched time. It's so easy to think of the snowflake generation or whatever. Actually, they're diligent, they work hard, they worry more about getting into the workplace than people of my generation did when it sort of fell through university ourselves. I've got a great deal of sympathy for people who've had a really tough 3 years. And to think that they're finally coming back to in-person teaching and their professors strike and withdraw, it's just a completely wrong time to do it.
Jo?
Well, I have to say I agree with Alex, which we're in great danger of agreeing with each other. But I also think, Austin's wider point about the fact that universities have become, students are bums on seats, they're customers. We know that some courses aren't really up to much. It's about the numbers of people that you get in. And we know that certainly, for people who are doing science courses, they've had a terrible lack of laboratory experience. So even people who've been doing sort of medical degrees, they haven't been able to get the laboratory or the sort of the on-site experience in order to go out and work as students, doctors in hospitals.
Well, let me know your thoughts. Do you know anyone at university being charged an arm and a leg to basically sit in their own bedroom and do their courses on the computer? Wouldn't be happy if that was me, I can tell you. Let me know your thoughts on that. But I want to talk about something else, if I may. I like to squeeze lots of subjects in because I want to talk to you about freedom. Have you heard those chants recently? Because I can tell you they are taking place everywhere, so it seems. Someone messaged me, one of the first emails that I got of the show tonight, someone said, the freedom convoys are spreading faster than COVID at the moment. I bring this up because now there's a big movement in France. There's a freedom convoy there that's headed over to Brussels today, despite warnings that they might be prevented from entering the Belgian capital. The French convoy, of course, was inspired by the movement that many say has paralysed Ottawa. Now, what do you think to this, Alexine? I'll start with you.
I think that force majeure sometimes works. People mount protests because it gets attention and sometimes you make your point and have it heard. Indeed, if you, an example you know more about than me, the government took one position on the unvaccinated in the NHS. Those people didn't budge and stood up, then the government took another view. Sometimes if you are bolshy and obstinate enough and you make your point and you refuse to get out of the way, just like the people we were talking about with some of the inquiries on earlier stories, then you get heard. Protests like this are more common on the continent than they are in North America. We've seen it work in North America, which implies to me it really will potentially work on the continent. I mean, barely a week goes by in the public imagination, at least, without somebody setting fire to hay bales on the Champs-Elysees. Well, sometimes the force majeure does get your way, and in Brussels it just might.
We shall see, Jo Phillips.
Yeah, I mean, there is a sort of a tendency that it's a bit of a hobby, isn't it? We saw a couple of years ago the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vest protests all through France. But this is not just about vaccinations. It's about the cost of living. It's the general malaise, if you like, of what's going on. President Macron's going into an election in a few weeks' time. He doesn't want these protests on his doorstep. It's right across Europe, but yes, it might make some effect. And Alex is right, to a certain extent it does. Obviously, it didn't on the Iraq War. 1 million people marched through London, didn't make a damn bit of difference. But there is also a danger because these people who are doing it for whatever reason are very ripe and ready for people to feed distorted facts and whip them up into a frenzy.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, we saw it in Capitol Hill in Washington, didn't we? You get people whipped up into a frenzy of mistrust, distrust, and things get out of hand. And I think it's potentially dangerous.
Well, what I think is out of hand is the mischaracterisation of a lot of these people that are protesting. These people are ordinary working class people. Lots of them, when you look at Canada, where all this began, actually, the whole trucker situation, they're just people wanting to go about their livelihoods and their lives, their day-to-day business. These truckers that were all...
Can I just quickly chip in then?
You can, Austin.
Because basically, I think that it's a fantastic thing that's happening in Canada, in Brussels, in Paris, in Israel now, there's convoys. And I think it's really remarkable that working class people people are actually standing up for their rights, whether it started off with anti-vaccine passports or mandatory vaccines is one thing, but it's now moved on, as you were saying, to be a broader conversation, almost like all the things we talked about today. What I find fascinating is that whereas Hillary Clinton got pilloried for calling them working class people deplorables and suffered the consequences, there's too regularly people are now being called xenophobes, fascists, or whatever it might be in these convoys without any legitimization whatsoever. And on the left, so the Socialist Workers' Party, I don't know whether you've ever brought that up before on this channel, but the Socialist Workers' Party magazine last week had a photograph and said that these are the fascists. And in fact, it had a banner saying unity is strength, the old traditional trade union banner. There wasn't a Nazi swastika anywhere to be seen. So I think it's a misrepresentation and it's scandalous what is being said about these people. But it goes back to my earlier point, which is that the reformalisation of working class protest outside a traditional union framework could be starting to be formulated now. That's where the left are really worried about, because they're not in control of it. They're worried about populism, and I'm actually quite in favour of it.
Well, I'm just want to clarify, I'm not attacking the people who are taking part in the protest, but what I'm saying is they are ripe for populism, which obviously you're in favour of, and, you know, you can appeal to people.
I didn't think you were doing that, Jay, but I did think that, I mean, I wasn't surprised particularly by the slurs on these protesters by Justin Trudeau. I was surprised by the blatant absurdity of just saying, these people are protesting, and therefore many of them are racists and misogynists. I mean, where did it even come from?
But it's relentless. I do feel like if a certain segment of the working class dares to stand up against anything, they're immediately smeared. You can have a big protest with God only knows how many people. It gets undermined. People zoom in on the one area, like two idiots might have had a bit of a scrap in the corner, and that then becomes the domineering kind of image and thought about the whole movement. And it frustrates a lot of people, me included. Anyway, it's almost time for us to go. But before I do, I cannot not mention Valentine's Day. It is indeed Valentine's Day today. Does that excite you? Are you single? Are you not? Well, if you're single, research shows that Brexit voting decisions are no longer a deciding factor in most dating lives in Britain. What a random concept. This is fresh figures released by... Yeah, they were. The Stack Data strategy today has revealed that the biggest turn-offs in a future partner for most Brit adults are smoking and being unvaccinated against COVID. I've got to say, I think there's some real weirdos out there.
Not for the first time.
No, I do. It's saying here that more than half of the population, 56%, are turned off at the prospect of dating someone who has not had their COVID vaccine. Almost 60% of them wouldn't date a smoker. And so it goes on. Panel, any of you single, excited about Valentine's Day today?
No.
No?
Well,
Austin, are you excited about Valentine's Day?
Speaking of weirdos, I went out with a girl years and years ago who she could only pronounce 4 vowels. She didn't know I existed.
Oh dear.
Austin. Alex?
Yes?
Any hilarious Valentine's Day stories
No hilarious
to sell?
Valentine's Day joke, but I'll be going off air and to a nice restaurant. I think Valentine's Day is lovely. And I don't care
will
who
you?
Oh, how sweet.
Well, I've got to say, speaking of Valentine's Day, one of my production team piped up today to tell me that he was single. Producer Richard. He's going to be spending his Valentine's night alone, so he is. And he told me he was on Tinder, but he reckons that his Tinder's broken because he don't get any matches. So here he is, our Richard. Look at him.
Michelle, you can't.
There he is. Why can't I do this? Yes, I can. There you go, Richard, 24.
Oh, Richard,
if you
poor
are
soul.
a lady in the London area and you see that fine specimen of mankind on your Tinder, give him a swipe. Is it to the right, if you like what you see? I think. Is it right if you like it?
I think so.
Left if you don't?
Yeah, ask Alex.
Oh, yeah, actually, you can email GBViews at GBNews. That's our Richard. He's a nice lad. I can... we've got a hashtag, I've been told. What's the hashtag? Romance for Richard.
He's going to have a lot of sort of male to sort, isn't he?
I hope his mum's
Richard
not
might not
watching.
actually be talking to me when I come off air, but anyway, you've got to take your opportunities where you can get them. Lots of you, by the way, was emailing me, and I asked you what you was all doing on Valentine's Day. I'm looking for them because I got loads of responses. Alan says I'm having a cheese toasty for one tonight. Janet says I've been married 52 years this year and never, in capitals, received a Valentine's card from my husband. He doesn't believe in it. Janet, get yourself a new husband, that's what I say. Mark says my wife and myself decided to not waste money on Valentine's Day years ago. It's important to love each other every day. Instead, David says I will be spending today alone. He says my wife Lizelle died 14 years ago and she will always be my Valentine every day of the year. David, I like that. Thinking of you tonight. Whatever you're doing on Valentine's Day, have a nice one. Alex has just pointed out that nobody should be taking dating advice from me, and quite frankly, he's absolutely right. Whatever you're doing tonight, have a lovely time. Don't forget Richard, if you're in the area, give him a swipe. Have a nice evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Clear at first tonight.